special broadcast.
And when they went to the queen to tell her her subjects had no bread, do you know what she said?
Let them eat cake.
He took the bomb.
We're getting screwed, man. Every time we turn around, we're getting screwed. Oh, the revolution's going to be through podcasting for sure. That's the only way we talk. The little guys that take the brunt of everything. It's got to stop. Peasants, man. We're just peasants. Every one of us. You watch those old movies, you see the peasants in the background with the kings and queens walking around. We're those people. We're those people. Good morning, peasants. Welcome to another episode of the Peasants Perspective. I'm so glad you guys are joining me again this morning, and welcome to the handful of new listeners that we have. I know it's going to be a little light on the show today live because I'm broadcasting like 2 hours earlier than I normally do. And basically what happened was my alarm was set for Pacific time, so I woke up at like 4 o'clock Pacific time, and I couldn't go back to bed. And I can't wait until 9:30 Eastern time when I normally broadcast to get going because I got to get going out the door. So I am broadcasting a little bit early. Man, I want to make sure I get an episode up. A lot of news has happened this weekend, especially to me. I just got basically towards the end of my trip, I went to Wisconsin to do a birthright screening with a 1776 live.us member up there. Met with a great group of about 40 people. It was absolutely awesome. Loved to do that. And then I made my way across the snow-swept northern part of the United States. So I made my way down across Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. Ended up stopping in Ohio and waiting the snowstorm out in a hotel room, and then made my way to New York City. And right now I'm sitting in Connecticut, and I'll be heading to New Jersey in about an hour, and then I'll be flying home. So really good day, really great week. I had a good time, and lots of news has happened since last Wednesday when we had our last live show. We had a little broadcast on Sunday night that I posted yesterday for you guys to listen to from Liberty Lounge at 1776. And then last night, I was on the Quite Frankly show. So welcome, Quite Frankly listeners. I know a few of you are probably going to join us today. Thank you so much for joining the Peasants as we emphasize the fact that we have to live here. No matter who's in charge, we're peasants, we have to live here. And so we want to know how to be able to survive, which means having clear eyes when we look at the situation that's unfolding around us politically as the people in power fight for more power over us, the people, the peasants. So years ago, there was a situation in California where a city didn't want to listen to the Department of Homeland Security. And one of the most prominent politicians in the country spoke out about this, on how it's not okay. It is not okay for local jurisdictions to just ignore Department of Homeland Security. So this little clip I've got here is Hillary Clinton. Listen to this.
Last week, an undocumented immigrant who had been deported 5 times killed a 32-year-old woman, Kate Steinle, in San Francisco, a sanctuary city where local law enforcement does not enforce federal immigration laws. When you last ran for president, you supported sanctuary cities in light of this terrible incident. Does that change anything about your view on this?
Well, what should be done is any city should listen to the Department of Homeland Security, which, as I understand it, urged them to deport this man again after he got out of prison another time. You know, here's a case where we've deported. He ends back up in our country. And I think the city made a mistake. The city made a mistake not to deport someone that the federal government strongly felt should be deported. So I have absolutely no support for a city that ignores the strong evidence that should be acted on.
Okay, no sympathy for a city that ignores the strong evidence should be acted on, namely the person's an illegal alien. They've already been brought into the country, commit a crime, they need to be deported. This was common sense. This was common sense my entire adult life. This was common sense forever. But we always knew illegal immigrants made it across the border, but we tolerated it because we assumed they were picking strawberries or picking almonds or doing some kind of agricultural labor that Americans apparently just didn't want to do, right? But what we found more and more is that's not the case, especially during the last 4 years of the Biden regime. My little experience here in New York, this little town that I filmed with Frank, or I recorded with Frank, as I walked around the town, first of all, it's like the suburbs of New York, right? And it's just the sea of people. And it's, I was told yesterday that the official population of this little town is about 30,000 people, but unofficially it's about 75,000 people. That's how many illegal immigrants. And I asked point blank, is this community, I haven't heard English yet. And he goes, it's all illegal aliens. I was like, wow, that's really incredible. So this was common sense, right? These people have to go. But Pam Bondi last week, right? She sent that strongly worded letter to Governor Walz. And one of the things she included in that letter was a desire to get voter information from the state of Minnesota. So if the Democrats have traditionally supported deportation, right? If you're a socialist, you need to control the labor market. This is really important. Bernie Sanders used to talk about open borders was a Koch policy, right? It wasn't a Bernie Sanders populist policy. This isn't good politics for either the Democrats or the Republicans. I guess it was probably good politics for the Republicans. It was bad politics for the Democrats, who pulled their support from labor unions who compete with illegal alien labor in a big way. But when Pam Bondi wrote in that letter, it could have stopped at, you need to let Department of Homeland Security and ICE into the jails to pick up prisoners. Okay, that's one thing. But she went on to ask for the voter rolls, which kind of exposes the entire game. So this is Keith Ellison out of Minnesota, the Attorney General, and he's talking about that letter that Pam Bondi sent. So here it is. And Harmeet Dillon posted this out. Well, obviously, right? So this is Keith Ellison. He's being asked about Pam Bondi's letter and about asking for voter information. This is why right now the Democrats are opposing deportations.
Let me just say, I think that the judge is incredibly bright and is focused on the critical issues. I'm not sure what to conclude or based on her questions, but it appeared to me, and I got the sense that she understood the issues very well. And I'll just say on my own behalf that the Pam Bondi letter kind of reveals what this is all about. This is not about fraud, and it's not even about immigration, and it's certainly not about law enforcement. It's about handing over documents of the state of Minnesota, private information, including voting information, to the federal government. That's what this is about. And that's why we're fighting it.
Yeah, that's why they're fighting it, because that's what this is about. When it comes to illegal immigration and what Joe Biden did over the last 4 years and what the body politic has allowed over the last 50 years, it has been about changing the demographics of America and about apportionment. It's about rigging the census so that Democrats, a party that without illegal voter, Jesse Kelly says is probably a 20% party, and I tend to agree with him on that, right, would have no power, especially in a state like Minnesota. Minnesota would normally be a pretty red state, but you've got a couple dense urban population centers that always tend to lean a little bit blue. I don't know. There's something in the water when enough people get together in a dense geographic area. But on top of that, you throw in the illegal immigration and the illegal immigrants that have been committing fraud, right? That like knits them together and ties them in with the politicians who enable it and allow it, and the bureaucrats that allow it. That is why they are resisting so much. Now, we believe in free speech. Of course we do. And especially free speech to be able to speak against the government. So here's Melissa Slotkin, former CIA agent representative. She says, right now, speaking out against abuse of power is the most patriotic thing we can do. I wonder if she said the same things in 2020 when they were trying to chase us around with shots and vaccines, or 2021, or I wonder if, it was okay to speak against the government when we were talking about censorship and then being censored for talking about censorship. Or one of the topics that came out last night on the Quite Frankly show was, what happened to my light? I went totally dark. What did I do? Oh, I kicked the little... Give me just a second, guys. I went dark here on you. I feel like one of those anonymous posters. Well, there we go. All right. I kicked the little plug in by my feet. Okay. So for those watching live, you just saw my face go completely dark, like I was like an X-22 broadcast or something like that. All right. Here's Melissa Slotkin. Free speech. Yeah, I agree, Melissa. I just don't think you actually believe this.
Even if you voted for him, I do not believe that his vision of America is shared by a majority of Americans. Because this country is worth fighting for. Our freedom of speech is worth fighting for. Our values, our core values, are worth fighting for. And right now, speaking out against the abuse of power is the most patriotic thing we can do.
Okay, so what is the abuse of power that we're speaking out against? Okay, so right now, the abuse of power we're speaking out against is deportations. We don't want the government to deport. They're using their power to deport. And she doesn't believe that even if you voted for Trump, this is what you voted for, deportations. Unfortunately, our favorite pollster over at CNN had a good little clip yesterday where he shared that, guess what? This is actually what the majority of Americans voted for. Check this out.
Sometimes I like blunt questions because they sort of get at the underlying feelings that people have. So this is about as blunt a question as you can get. Deport all immigrants here illegally. I will note the ABC News poll asked about undocumented immigrants. So we have slightly different questions, but these were all taken within the last month. And there's real uniformity here. That's what I really think you see. You see real uniformity. Deport all immigrants who are here illegally, 55% of the New York Times. Marquette, 64%. CBS News, 57%. ABC News with a slightly different question, 56%. So what you're seeing essentially here is a very clear indication that a majority of Americans, in fact, when they're asked this blunt question, which I believe gets at the underlying feelings, do in fact want to deport all immigrants who are here illegally. There's no arguing with these different numbers because they're all essentially the same across 4 different pollsters. Feelings towards immigration in this country, feelings towards undocumented immigrants and deporting all of them have become considerably more hawkish. And I think that gives Donald Trump much more leverage to go with the American people and sort of have these hawkish, some might say harsh, different rhetoric and also issue-based sort of going after immigrants who are here illegally, want immigration levels decreased. This includes legal and illegal immigration. Look at this. Last year, 55%. That is the highest level since the 9/11 aftermath. You go back just to 2020.
And this, again, legal and illegal. So people want less people coming into the country.
Exactly. They want less people coming into the country. Look at that. That's a 14-point rise from 2023. You go back to 2016 when Donald Trump again was running for president the first time, it's 38%. That's a 17-point rise. So the bottom line is more folks want people who are here illegally deported, and their overall feelings towards immigration have become considerably more hawkish.
63% say they're okay with deporting immigrants who are here illegally and arrived in the last 4 years. 87% are good with deporting immigrants who are here illegally and have criminal records.
Okay, so overall, Americans want less people coming into the country. They want more people deported, and especially people with criminal records, right? So let's just set the premise that if you're here illegally and your only crime is having crossed the border to come work in our strawberry fields, okay, that's your only crime, then there is some tolerance within the American populace to find a place for you in our communities and in our society. But if you are a criminal itself, like if you are convicted of a crime or even in your home country, we don't want you. We don't want you. You need to go back and be dealt with by your own home country. You need to face law and order just like everybody else. But the Democrats, again, remember, Keith Ellison gave this away. This isn't about law and order. This isn't about deportations. This isn't about immigration. This is about elections. This is about the people and these immigrants being able to vote. So on one hand, politicians understand this, right? Hillary Clinton, hey, you got to deport people. You got to pay attention to ICE. You hear Tim Walz, Slogan, all of them are going to say the right words. Law and order. We believe in rule of law. We believe in all that stuff. But when you actually get down to what's happening in Minnesota and in other major cities where people are protesting ICE and immigration from doing their job, this is what they're doing. They're protecting criminals. Caitlin Bennett did a man on the street interview with this gentleman, and it is absolutely perfect. He's out there protesting ICE, saying ICE is, Nazis, fascists, whatever the case is. This is posted by at TonyX2. Liberal loses his mind when he realizes that he is the one protecting illegal pedos, and ICE is the only agency that can remove and deport these pedos. So listen to this little clip here. This is what the Democrats, in order to protect their seats of power, their congressional districts and stuff like that, are tricking tricking normal Americans who apparently don't have a full scope of what's happening. That's why we have a show like this, The Peasant's Perspective, so a peasant like this guy can get the right perspective as to what's actually going on. Caitlin Bennett exposes the people he's protecting, the people he's protesting to protect right now are the illegals that have committed heinous crimes that ICE is
right here on the back. If you want, just read one of them. Because there's one up here. Muhammad has multiple counts of credit card fraud. Oh, he's Somalian. Right there. But we can do Ignacio. It was in the U.S. illegally from Mexico. He was previously arrested for child cruelty and battery. He was supposed to be deported, and Biden did not make that happen. Miguel is a Mexican national arrested previously for cruelty towards a child. There's one guy on here that was arrested for strong arm sodomy against a little boy and a little girl. Those are pedophiles.
Okay.
And so when you want ICE out of Minnesota or Minneapolis, this is who you're protecting.
No, I am not trying to protect those people. I'm protecting the actual people who had not had any previous criminal charges against them being deported. Sure, maybe those people have been convicted. Maybe they should get out. But
how do they get out, though?
I mean, get out.
But how does that happen without ICE?
Find some other organization not hiring criminals.
There isn't. There is no lawful organization that can remove somebody that's here illegally and committed crimes. They can't do it.
You know what that's called? That's called the fucking police.
The local police does not. They don't deport people. ICE does.
Okay, well, here's the thing, though. Say that, they want to get these criminal, or they want to, convict the criminal, get them out, right? You want to know an easy way to know if someone been convicted, an easy way to get criminals? Go to the fucking jail cell, get the people that have already been convicted, get them out, not random people on the fucking streets.
Okay, so again, we're just going to talk calmly here. These people are pedophiles and they are criminals. Give me 1 second before your impulse tells you to interrupt me, okay? 1 second. If you don't want ICE going around, if you don't want them to exist, if you want them abolished, these people would still be in our streets. These people would still be going out and raping children. There is no one that could deport them. They don't have the agency to do that. And I think it's dangerous.
So that clip, by the way, just in case you were wondering, is not a fresh clip. It's been around a while. But that's it, right? They're protecting pedophiles. And I love the way he says that. They can go into the jails and pick them up. That's all they ever wanted to do in the first place. But you've got these sanctuary jurisdictions where they do not allow ICE to come and collect illegal immigrants who have finished serving their sentence in American prisons and jails. And that is one of the biggest issues here, is you let them back out on the streets. Right? We have a big enough problem with our own citizens that have recidivism and things like that. Why do we want to engage with this with the illegal population? It makes no sense. It's fascinating because we had the numbers come out, was it last week, about the overall crime stats, murders down, burglar, like all the federal crime stats are down. Now, in fairness, we were doubting the crime stats before under Christopher Wray if they were manipulated. Who knows if they're manipulated anymore? But the headline, crime stats down, and New York Times is confused. We don't know what would be causing this. I don't know. Maybe it's because bad guys are getting put in prison. Trump has surged into a bunch of these inner cities like Memphis, which was one of the murder capitals of the country, took thousands of criminals who have who are likely to reoffend off the streets. And oddly enough, if you take the one guy in the neighborhood that's a thief and you remove him from the neighborhood, there are no more thieves in the neighborhood, right? So we want to let Border Patrol and we want to let ICE, we want to let them do their jobs. We don't want to get out in front of them. And with all the protesting that's going on, it's becoming more and more difficult for ICE officers to do that, to just do their job. Carolyn Levitt talks about this, and she makes a pretty stunning comparison to the press here, that if they had to walk through protesters every day that were doing things like biting off the tips of their fingers, it would be really hard to do their job as well.
Unlawfully obstruct lawful immigration enforcement in this country. And these agitators are making it nearly impossible for ICE to do their jobs and for federal law enforcement to carry out the will of the American people to deport the worst of the worst. And we know that's the will of the American people. We just played you the Harry Enton clip where it's like 60% want pretty much mass deportation, 87% support deporting people that are guilty of
crimes, or even if they've been charged with crimes, we want them out of here. We don't even want to have in our system and to be taxed. Let them sit in prison in Honduras or Somalia, for heaven's sakes. So she's saying it's impossible for them to do their job, and the will of the American people is to do it.
I would just encourage everyone to please imagine in this room, all of you come to the White House every day to report on the President of the United States and the administration. You come into this briefing room, you walk through the gates of the White House. Just imagine if there were left-wing agitators or agitators of any kind who were in your face, who were doxing you, who were harassing you, who were physically threatening you, who were biting off your fingers. In the case of two Border Patrol agents we saw this past weekend in Minneapolis, that would make it very difficult for you to show up and do your job here at the White House every single day. That's what these officers in Minneapolis are facing. That's why the president is calling on Governor Walz, Mayor Frey for these three very simple and common sense points: unlawfully obstruct lawful immigration enforcement in this country. And these agitators are making it nearly impossible for ICE to do that.
Okay, my light went out. So I'm going to duck under the chair. Plug this thing in. Oh, it's not AI, folks. It's not AI. AI would never have to climb under the desk to plug his light back in, or its light back in. It's not a he or she. Men and women are he or she. AI isn't it. So it's nearly impossible for ICE to do their job in areas like Minnesota where people are obstructing. And why are they obstructing? They're literally protecting pedophiles in some instances. We've got lots of clips where, an ICE officer comes over to a protester, a legal observer, and goes, when you blow that whistle, it makes it hard for us to arrest the pedophile that we're trying to arrest. And then they're like, oh, you're arresting a pedophile? I was like, yes, we're arresting a pedophile. It's like, oh, well, I'll go along my way. Just like that guy there. Well, they should go into the jails and get them. Then tell your governor and tell your mayor to let them go into the jails, right? Kash Patel, we know that these protests are not organic. There's just zero chance they're organic. And we know because we had the huge Signal Gate, which I haven't covered. We talked about it last night on Frank's show. We've got the Signal chat groups that were infiltrated. You've got the lieutenant general of the state of Minnesota that was in the Signal chats as an admin, directing people to go after ICE. They had broken the city up into zones, and it was really crazy. Well, Kash Patel was on with Benny Johnson, and guess what? They know who's funding it. They have followed the money. They know who's funding it, and he disclosed that but didn't say much more, which is awesome, right? I can't wait to see who it actually is, although I think we know it's Nivil Singham out of Singapore. And who knows, maybe we'll even see an indictment.
And that's the distinction. You want to go out there and peacefully protest, have at it. You want to go out there and use your Second Amendment right to bear arms, okay, no problem. But look at the situation in Minnesota. This is not something that just happened overnight. They've been rioting recklessly, destroying federal vehicles, ramming federal agents, literally hitting them, striking them, and as you just highlighted, using coordinated attacks to threaten their families. None of that is lawful, and none of that will be tolerated. You do not get to touch law enforcement. And we've got also investigations ongoing into the funding of this. We've made actual substantial progress. I just can't publicize it yet, but we've actually found groups and individuals responsible for funding it because it's not happening organically.
This is incredible to hear.
And that's
so now we just have to sit back and wait and see if we finally get any accountability for the people who funded it. That's the crazy thing about this is open source intelligence has pretty much revealed who these funders are, and yet there's just been nothing done about it. And we could chalk that up to a lot of things. I probably just think they're mostly politically connected, and they know the marching orders is that they want to win elections, and that's what all the illegal immigration and the protesting against it is about. It's about power. It's about consolidating and maintaining power. And unfortunately, people get swept up in this that are actually, under ordinary circumstances are good people. And these are people that are our neighbors, our friends. I'm super sympathetic with peasants, normal people who get caught up in the political process and get caught up in the machine. And I'm one of these people, right? I went to January 6th. I don't look back and think that the cause wasn't noble or just, but clearly, right, I put myself in a position that the government could make me a target. Well, last week when these ICE protesters ran off some Border Patrol and ICE agents from their vehicles, they ended up breaking in, getting a gun, the gun lockers out. They ended up getting a long rifle. They did arrest that guy. He was a gang member, by the way. And they just made another arrest yesterday in Spokane. So the protest is happening in Minnesota, and the protesters broke into one of the vehicles and they grabbed a whole bunch of documentation, warrants and stuff like that. So here's the clip of that. It's just pretty quick. But, you know, they broke into the car and they found all these papers and things like arrest warrants or just paperwork that had that and doxed the ICE agents. Well, somebody in Spokane took the information that was doxed and made threatening phone calls. So this is from Eric Daugherty. Breaking, the FBI has arrested a woman who reportedly used personal information stolen from a federal vehicle in Minneapolis to threaten to kill an officer, his wife, and child. Good. They must be locked up. Keep all federal agents safe. Oh, that's the part I don't necessarily agree with. Yes, keep all federal agents safe. Good. They must be locked up. And they have to be punished and held accountable. Details matter on this. Quote, FBI agents in Spokane, Washington, at the request of FBI Minneapolis, arrested a woman after she left 3 disturbing voicemails threatening to kill an FBI agent, his wife, and child because of the agent's employment in Minnesota. If you threaten to harm law enforcement officers or their families, the FBI will find you and hold you accountable. I know a guy who's just got done serving a 2-year sentence for leaving threatening voicemails on Eric Swalwell's answering machine. I served time in prison with no less than a dozen other people who had made threats to public officials, judges, law enforcement officers, et cetera, and they were serving anywhere from 6 months to 5 years in time. That is a high price to pay for making these threats. So, it'll be adjudicated, and most likely this person is going to go to jail unless they've got a friendly judge. It's too bad, though. I sympathize because it didn't have to happen. Why do you care? Why do you care in Spokane, right? So another thing that happened this last week was Carlene Johnson, a reporter out of Washington State, met with Pat McCarthy. And who's Pat McCarthy? She's the Washington State auditor, and she's in charge of auditing all of the programs and stuff like that that the state and federal government funds through the state. And Carlene Johnson met with her, and she exposed some of the fraud that she has discovered here in the state of Washington. Or here, I'm from the state of Washington, right? It's over there. I'm in Connecticut right now. But in the state of Washington, she's found obvious signs of fraud just with the publicly available data. Unfortunately, Pat McCarthy said the office will not be investigating reports of alleged daycare fraud within the scope of the current audit. This reporter was also told not to investigate, quote, as I'm not a, quote, licensed investigator. So let's listen to this. And there's something in here that's pretty interesting that I want to point out as far as, setting up a future cover-up. Let's watch this because I kind of feel like they're setting up a cover-up in real time.
And many of them are receiving, hundreds of thousands of dollars over a few months' time in subsidies. So that's
have you reported that to DCYF or reported
it? Here's the thing. It's not my job. It's right there, publicly accessible information. So I would say if you're auditing these large payouts, it would make sense. It's easy to see. Okay. So this auditor goes right after declaring just previously in the interview, when the auditor said she can't really audit anything. And then she says, well, I found this fraud. She's like, well, did you turn it in? And she's like, it's right there. You go to childcareware, find the address or the name of the provider. Then you go to fiscal.wa.gov, type in the name of the provider, and boom, it comes up and shows, wow, he got $250,000 in 5 months last year. And it shows he cares for 6 kids at his home. I mean, it's so.
Okay. First of all, I would say as a mother of 4 and with 11 grandkids, and all of them have been in daycare at some point because all of them are working families, I would not want a citizen going to my child's daycare.
Okay. I would not want a citizen going to my child's daycare. Fine and dandy. Except it would be a pretty easy pass-fail if you walk up on a daycare that's receiving funds from the government and there's kids there. You don't even have to knock on the door. You can walk away because there's kids there. It's the places that have no kids or signs that kids are ever there or any inclination that they're doing anything related to the funding that they're getting, right? But Pat McCarthy here, she's like, well, not only can I not investigate it, and then she's like, well, did you send the tips in? And then she's like, why do I have to send the tips in? It's super obvious. Then she's like, well, I wouldn't want people coming to that. It's like total deflection.
And that's not the point. That's not the point. That is irrelevant. I have every right to go there as a reporter.
If you have a concern, there are people that you can give that information to. Give it send it to us. You have a credible incidents, send it to us on our Hotmail line.
Send it to us on our Hotmail line. That was the key phrase I wanted you to hear. Send it to us on our
Hotmail line.
Hotmail. The Washington State auditor is asking people to send tips in on a Hotmail account that is not subject to FOIA unless you know that to request it and force the government to force that private person who has that private Hotmail account to turn it over as part of government records. The Washington State government auditor is taking tips on fraud on a Hotmail account. And I'm saying this right now. That's not really what they were saying there. I'm telling you right now, when you hear something like that, that's a cover-up happening. They're making it so that the tips themselves that they won't investigate, because she'd already previously said they couldn't really investigate or audit this stuff. And we had an interview that we played early last week where this same person was basically saying we have none of the tools available to us that we would need to actually root out this fraud. They want you to send the tips to a Hotmail account. Holy smokes, right? It's obvious the fraud is clearly taking place. Even Jacob Fry, mayor of Minneapolis, is forced to admit this very fact.
So the fraud is real. The fraud that took place here is very real. And when you commit fraud, you get investigated, you get charged, you get prosecuted, you get arrested, and you go to jail. As an individual, you go to jail as an individual. The whole community, however, that you are part of and the whole city that you live in is not held responsible. The whole state you live in is not held responsible. That's the way things work in Minnesota. That's the way things work in the United States of America, because everybody has due process and habeas corpus rights.
Okay, first of all, you have due process rights. Habeas corpus is for citizens, okay? And due process, the way he's referring to it, is also for citizens. Due process for an illegal alien, the process that you are due is, can I see your ID? And when you fail to produce it, you get a ticket to the border, back to where you came from, right? That is your due process if you're here illegally. But he says it openly. Yes, there's fraud. It's very real. Okay, Jacob Fry, let's go after that very real fraud. And let's go after the individuals that are committing that fraud of all flavors, right? And let's say, for example, if we don't want to punish the entire state of Minnesota, maybe we should start with the top of the snake. Let's start with the top of the corruption. Let's look at elected officials who might be in on all of this fraud. Here's Benny Johnson. I don't know if he broke this story or not, or just is sharing it here, but apparently Ilhan Omar is a little bit shady. Duh. But more specifically, did you know she has a winery? You know, I always find it interesting when Muslims or Mormons or people who oppose alcohol invest in alcohol stock or businesses. It's really interesting to me. But here you go. This is Benny Johnson talking about Ilhan Omar. So, Jacob Fry, if you really believe in law and order and you really believe in justice, yes, let's go after the individuals who are committing the fraud.
Financial disclosures. And what I found was so dark and criminal, I don't know how she gets out of this without going to jail. Have a look at this. Here's Ilhan Omar's financial disclosure from the Congressional Record, year 2023. I want to bring your attention to this company right down here, Est Crew LLC. This is a winery in Santa Rosa, California. It's not doing that well. The total value of the winery is listed at $15,000, and Ilhan Omar's barely making any money off of it at all. Hardly enough to pay a parking ticket. Okay, that's fine. Nothing really mysterious there. Businesses fail all the time. But go ahead and look at her filing for 2024, and you'll find that Est Crew Winery, the same company in the same location, is now worth $5 million. That's incredible, up from $15,000. And now Ilhan Omar's making enough to pay rent. So this must be one of the most successful companies ever. Let's go ahead and check in on this winery. You know, maybe we could buy some wine. I like wine. Why not? Let's see if we can buy some Est Crew Winery. Here's Est Crew's social media Facebook page. You'll see here that the last post, oh no, was in 2023. Wasn't this the year that they were supposed to, go really big and make Ilhan Omar millions of dollars? Same thing on their Instagram, and they don't have an X. So let's go ahead and check their official website. What is Est Crew? We are winemakers and memory curators, okay? Est Crew Winery has a bunch of brands that's led by these people, creators of eye-catching labels. So I'm sure I can go and get some of their wine, right? Well, they don't have any activities here, so maybe I could just go to their location and buy some of their wines, or maybe give them a call. Let's try and go to their location here. This is the Google Street View of Est Crew Winery, and what you'll find here is an empty parking lot. Doesn't actually look like an operational business. Certainly isn't the same name. So, okay, let's go ahead and give them a call. See if maybe they pick up. Let's go ahead and call the number on the webpage. Let's go ahead and give them a call and find out. Oh no, user busy. Let's try that. Okay. Well, I've done this like 20 times today. Okay, so that didn't work. Is there any wine in this wine company? Is there anything about wines? Because I see like stuff about events, but like, what is this exactly? Aren't you supposed to sell wine at your wine company? Where are your wines? Oh, there are no wines. You want to know why? Because this is a fake company. Rep. Ilhan Omar's husband accused of swindling investors in their California winery. They stole millions from cannabis growers. You can see here's the lawsuit right here, saying that Tim Minette, who's Ilhan Omar's third husband, no relation, swindled his investors and defrauded them. How did Minette get this relationship? Well, the current Attorney General of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, used to work for him. Isn't that curious? Keith Ellison, the same guy who refuses to look into any of the Somali fraud. So this company was sued for being a fraudulent company. And the New York Post says the exact same thing, as the House is now probing the mystery of Ilhan Omar's skyrocketing wealth. They said that Ilhan Omar went from being one of the poorest members of Congress, worth negative $65,000, to being one of the richest, worth $30 million. Here's a rare photo of one of their wines that they allegedly made, The Devil's Lie. But the entire company is actually a lie. It's not a lie to Ilhan Omar, though, because she's able to list an enormous amount of her income and an enormous amount of her net worth to this fake winery. This winery is not worth $5 million. The winery doesn't even exist. It's fake. It's fraudulent. They need to investigate this.
So Jacob Fry, the fraud is very real. There is some fraud. Are you going to look into it? I don't think so. Because Jacob Fry's wife is the chief lobbyist for the state of Minnesota. You don't think he's got a couple wineries tucked around a couple bins, right? You don't think he's got a couple wineries in his back pocket for a rainy day? The Democrats lie to us. They lie to us about what they're doing. They lie to us about their intentions, but they do let it slip out, like Keith Ellison being like, yeah, this is all about elections. Of course it is. Of course it's all about elections, because all you guys care about is power. John Fetterman emphasized this with Sean Hannity. When Sean Hannity confronted him directly, did your party lie about the border being open for 4 years?
Two things. Do you agree with me when I say that for 4 years, the country was lied to on a spectacular basis about the border being secure and the border being closed, and 12 million plus unvetted illegals came into the country as a result, including all these bad people? Is that all true? The Democrats allow that to happen and then lie about it?
Yeah, without a doubt. President Biden did a terrible job, and our border was effectively open at that point. Whether Biden and Mayorkas did not secure our border, and I tried to warn my party back in 2023 that this would cost us in the election, and America deserves to secure our border. I don't know why every American can't agree with that thing. And another thing, it's the truth that we should all agree to deport all of the criminals, that are here in our nation right now.
Yeah, John Fetterman, the man of reason. I tell you, I'm always so shocked at John Fetterman. I say this almost every time we play a clip from him. Mehmet Oz, who's now I don't know, he's Medicaid, Medicare, I can't remember. Some of those health departments, they get into their little sub departments, but Mehmet Oz ran against him for Senate. And I didn't like him as a candidate, okay? I wouldn't have wanted to vote for him. He wasn't my preferred Republican candidate. But John Fetterman had a stroke. He couldn't even make a coherent sentence. And he's a Democrat liberal, right? He's still on social issues, things like abortion and stuff like that, and labor. Like, he and I are not going to agree. But, you know, he's a common sense kind of guy. I kind of appreciate the hoodie. I'm a hoodie person too. So anyways, yes, the Democrats were lying. Yes, the border was wide open. He did try to warn his party about that. Now, I will say this, if you can go back and pull clips from John Fetterman, he praises Biden and stands by him and blah, blah, blah. So he's part of it too, right? I mean, he's a politician just like the rest of them. But yeah, the Democrat Party lies. Right. And this is convinced even Marco Rubio that the Democrat Party can't ever be let near power again. These people are crazy.
They'd also take over our election system. They pretty much said they want to do that. Val Deming says she also wants the federal government to potentially take over our property insurance, which is, you can just imagine. Maybe that's what the 87,000 IRS agents will do, is run the insurance company. But I mean, the list goes on of the parade of horribles of things they would do. Look, if they were in power, I'm convinced of this now. If they had a no filibuster, whatever, and they had been in charge during the COVID, they would have locked down the country. They would have done to the country what they did to New York, what they did to California, what they did to Illinois. That's what they would have done. In fact, Val Demings has said as much, and I think both Demings and Christ are on record as late as I think last summer, asking for another shutdown in the state. They would have spent $4-something trillion. They tried to, and even in their infrastructure bill, they brag about only a quarter of that money went to infrastructure. The rest of it went to take on very serious problems like, you know, racist roads and discriminatory trees and whatever else they can think of. And so, look, I'm sorry. I hate to say this about my fellow Americans. These people are out of their minds, and they cannot be allowed to be near power. You know,
they cannot be allowed to be near power. I really question what the resolve is amongst the members of the cabinet, specifically Pam Bondi, who has, you know, a lot of say and a lot of stuff that needs to get done between now and the midterms to secure the elections, to keep these people from power in a fair way. That's my big concern, right? The writing on the wall for me is if you don't deal with the elections, then we're going to have to deal with it. That's the problem. If you don't deal with the elections, then we're going to have to deal with it at large, the craziness, the 20% minority getting 51% of the vote. And then they start doing stuff like what they did before, right? 2021, I was one of these people. I got rounded up. I got myself a show trial. Steve Bannon got a show trial. And this is what's going to happen if these people are allowed near power again. If the deportations don't continue and the elections are not fixed, this is what's in our future.
This is the way they've been doing this really since the French Revolution, but they perfected it in the Bolshevik takeover of Russia and then the Communist Revolution. This is why they had a cultural revolution humiliation ritual, because they want to put you through humiliation rituals. That's what they're talking about Nuremberg trials. What they mean is the Moscow show trials. They want to put the people that defend the American Republic on trial. This is what I had when I went to prison. It was a show trial. They don't even let you in J6. They didn't even let you put on a defense. None of the J6ers could really put on a defense. They have a Moscow show trial.
None of the J6ers could really put on a defense. That was what really convinced me to finally go it on my own. Was I watched, I don't know, by the time I made the decision, I'd watched at least 24 cases go through. And, you know, I was in the weeds. I was looking at the motions, looking at the stuff that they weren't allowed to present, because you learn more reading the docket than a juror learns. A juror doesn't find out all the suppressed evidence, the things the judge says can't put in front of the jury. And so a lot of stuff the judges can weed out to where basically any reasonable jury would convict someone by the time the judge has curated the evidence that they get to see. That's called a show trial. That's called being railroaded. And that's basically how the system is currently work, is it railroads you. So I feel bad for the protesters that are getting involved, man. It ain't worth it. Trust me, it ain't worth it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And for peasants, don't ever send threatening messages to politicians. Don't do it. Don't threaten their lives, their kids. Don't make stupid phone calls and voicemails. Be articulate. Be clear. Don't swear. Don't make threats. Let your voice be heard, but do it the right way. It's not even like a gray line. That's the thing. There is no threat. The threat could be stupid, right? There is no threat that's worth doing. The moment you threaten a politician, they're going to ignore you if you're a peasant. The only threats that they listen to are the threats that come with a paycheck, okay? They're not going to listen to you when you just call and leave some nasty voicemail, but it might cost you years of your life, so don't do it. Scott Bessent was talking about this situation with the Canadian Prime Minister Carney. Carney went to Davos and he made some stupid comments. He made some stupid comments about basically abandoning America and partnering with China. And apparently there was a phone call between Donald Trump and Mark Carney that Scott Bessent listened to, where Mark Carney kind of walked all that back. And Scott Bessent's explained, listen, he's a globalist and he's not doing what's in the interest of Canada.
And interest rates will be down significantly. They're already down quite a bit. Let's talk about the Prime Minister, or if you prefer, Governor of Canada, and him threatening to, break economic alliances with the U.S., go with China. The president has threatened a 100% tariff. What impact would that have?
It would be a disaster for Canada. I was in the Oval with the president today. He spoke to Prime Minister Carney, who was very aggressively walking back some of the unfortunate remarks he made at Davos. And Sean, I'm not sure what the Prime Minister was thinking. Of course, Canada depends on the U.S. There's much more north-south trade than there could ever be east-west trade. He talks about middle countries having to do their own thing. And I'm old enough to remember when French President Francois Mitterrand tried to go down that route. It failed back in the 80s. It'll fail now. And Canada is linked to the U.S., and the Prime Minister should do what's best for the Canadian people rather than trying to push his own globalist agenda.
That was one of the things we found out about Mike Carney when he became the Prime Minister of Canada, is he hadn't even lived in Canada. He was coming over from Europe, coming back to rule, right? They basically just appointed him into his position. Really interesting thing up there. They do most of their trade with the United States. I saw a map of their population density. Basically like 90% of the population of Canada lives within like 75 miles of their southern border, our northern border. Like they're basically just like United States North. Right. So they really can't survive without us. And Mark Carney, his globalist agenda is absolutely leaving them short-sighted. And there's a huge succession movement happening in Canada right now. I believe, based on everything I'm looking at, the meetings they're having, the people who are lining up for the polls, the polling that is there, is that Alberta is likely going to succeed from Canada this year. Apparently, their charter and the King of England and blah, 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 something led to the situation where they're able to basically become their own sovereign nation. So this right here is Jeffrey Rath, and he's talking about Alberta becoming an independent nation. The discussion of the world order comes up from time to time. We've talked about it on this show quite a bit. There's always a world order. The world order might be chaos. The world order might be, capitalism. The world order could be any number of things, right? So there's always a world order. What we want to avoid is a totalitarian world order, right? If the world order is Republican forms of democracy, okay, all right, that's the world order, okay? But we want to avoid totalitarian world order. Well, the world order we've had now has been based on the dollar. It's been based on trade. It's and the United States truly has been the police of the world. They've been the police of the policies that go in place to enforce contracts and how those contracts and treaties and trade agreements should all look. That is all being rewritten right now. The truth of the matter is China is having a population problem. They've got an economic might and a military might. They have a demographic problem. They also have some domestic financial problems, which aren't as big a deal because of their economic model for them, because they can just suppress and control their economy completely. But you also have a lot of issues with other countries not living up to their trade deals. And a lot of this has to do with where manufacturing is and a lot of this corruption. Like the corruption is a huge deal. When you see Ilhan Omar there with $30 million in net worth, that's like 10 tanker ships worth of goods and supplies that didn't make it to market because that money got mopped up in her bank account instead of in something tangible, right? If she was actually producing all those bottles of wine, then there would be a product there. The money represents a product. In this case, the money doesn't represent a product. That's very damaging. So this clip I'm going to play you about Alberta, this is the model of the new world order. So if you want to know what Donald Trump is trying to implement, what the raw politique, the statecraft, how nation states will handle themselves, this clip right here coming out of Alberta is explaining the mentality that Donald Trump has for America and defending America's trade, and what he's encouraging other nations to do. Use the leverage you have to get the best deal you can for your people. So take a listen to this. This is the model of the New World Order. Whether you like it or not, this is the realpolitik.
Imagine a free and independent Alberta, right? And we turn to BC and we say, okay, British Columbia, we're an independent country, and 70% of your goods flow east to Ontario out of Vancouver ports. Now, as you may know, Alberta is a rat-free jurisdiction. We want to keep it that way. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop every train going through Alberta at the border and inspect it for rats. We're going to stop every truck at the border, make sure there's no rats on board. This rat inspection could take 2-3 weeks, maybe a month, right? And while we're, all those goods are sitting there piling up at the, at the border, we're going to have our customs inspectors go on board. We're going to value the goods on board. We're going to put a throughput tariff on all of those goods, right? Or you can give us a pipeline. Take your pick, right? It's that simple. Alberta is an independent country. BC becomes landlocked, in that circumstance, right? All of the goods that are imported to BC will be stuck in BC unless they come to an agreement with Alberta over a pipeline. That's how things work in the real world. And if you've got leverage, you can get deals done. Right now, Alberta has no leverage because we're stuck in this dysfunctional relationship with Ottawa where, we have twice the population of the Maritimes, but only 6 senators to their 30. We have twice the population of the Maritimes, but like half of their, basically half of their members of parliament. We only have 2, all of Western Canada only has 2 seats on the Supreme Court. So no wonder they rule the way they rule on division of powers issues, et cetera, right? All of that goes away when Alberta votes itself out of Canada.
That is the New World Order right there. It's sovereign peoples taking what they have. What are your advantages, right? Alberta's landlocked. You don't have a port. The only port, I guess they don't have any ports because there's the Northwestern Territories above them. I think they renamed those years ago, whatever they are. But right, Alberta's landlocked, but it's productive. It's got farmland, it's got minerals, it's got gas, oil, all that kind of stuff, but they can't get it to market. They can't get it to market. They can't get it to British Columbia to get it out to port, right? So if they can become independent, now they have a bargaining chip. That's the New World Order. Trump is saying, here's our bargaining chips, tariffs, enforcement, blah, 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 blah. And he's encouraging other countries to do the same thing. Enforce your rules. Stop looking to us to enforce your rules, because when us, and I'm referring to people in power in the United States that have been given the mantle of control to control the world order, when they become corrupt, your stuff fails. Like he's saying there, you start having misapportionment. That's what Canada's got more, Alberta has more population, but somehow they've misapportioned representation. Those are all endemic things that happen under the current world order model once the corruption sets in. The only antidote to that is to take back sovereignty. It's no different than in our personal lives, right? If your company is absolutely busted and corrupt and whatever, sometimes the best thing you can do is quit. Right? We control our power of association. So kudos to Alberta for doing that. I look forward to seeing them be an independent country. It'll be very, very interesting. I have a feeling if Alberta goes independent, I think Canada is probably going to fold like a cheap sock when it comes to the Greenland issue and stuff like that. So it could be interesting. All right. One last topic I wanted to talk about before I call it short. We're coming up on my close to an hour, which was my objective for broadcasting this morning. Welcome all of you guys. A lot of you guys showed up here on Rumble this morning. I'm broadcasting super early for my normal listeners. If you are a first-time listener or a new listener, please, especially if you're on Rumble, please make a comment in the chats. I'm in the creator program for Rumble, and I have to have so many unique chatters in the live chat every month. And when I do off-schedule shows, I don't get as many chatters. So I really appreciate Sapphire Patriot, who's actually been communicating with me all here. So before we get to the next topic, we're going to talk about copper. Let me read through this. Sapphire Patriot says, thank you, Taylor, for your voice. Well, thank you very much. Carlitos, buenos dias from Puerto Rico, our international audience. We are international, by the way, have regular listeners in the United Kingdom and 6 months out of the year, Puerto Rico. Carlitos, great interview last night on Quite Frankly. Thank you very much. It was such an honor to go to that show. I had been listening to Quite Frankly for half a decade, right? Long before I ever got involved with J6 or anything. He was on my regular playlist. I listened to him almost every day. So it was kind of I wouldn't say a dream come true, but it was, I don't know that I ever dreamed about it, but it was really neat to be able to meet him. And his audience, when I was in prison and I did the prison interview, supported my family. They ended up donating to my wife enough to make 1 or 2 mortgage payments. It was a really big deal. So very grateful to be on his show last night. Sapphire Patriot says, fire Bondi. I feel she is compromised. Evidence is everywhere. That's a tough one. I'm hesitant for, just last night, Bovino, the director of the Border Patrol, he was relocated from Minneapolis down to California, and they're sending Tom Holman in. And the news is acting like Bovino's going to be fired. They're all upset about how he handled the situation up in Minneapolis. And then this morning we got some news about, no, he's still going strong. He's just getting reassigned. He's Border Patrol. He's down in California now, right? So I'm really hesitant to give a scalp, right? I feel like a lot of black pillars and a lot of people who believe that nothing can be done believe that Pam Bondi has the go. And it's very difficult to thread this needle. You've got someone like Bill Barr that Trump had in his first term, who was allegedly super competent and could wield the DOJ, but he was a snake. He wasn't loyal, right? After Trump lost the election, he worked with Fani Willis to help essentially put him in prison. I mean, this is not, he's a competent attorney general. He knows how to use the levers of power, but he was not loyal. So Pam Bondi, I don't know if she's a competent attorney general. I don't know, but she seems loyal to Donald Trump. So the evidence that she is or isn't loyal, like that's like everybody. Everybody's compromised in one way or another. That's real. That's just how politics are. So I'm always really torn on the Pam Bondi issue and the firing these people. I don't know that I had a high expectation. Now keep in mind, I was in prison. Like there's a lot on the line for me here, right? I've never had the expectation that things would happen in the first year or two. In fact, even when I was in prison and people would ask me, what's the best case scenario? I always thought accountability would come after the midterms, because then Trump doesn't need political capital to hold the House. That's when he can just go balls to the walls and just, gut the deep state, leave it laying on the floor, because he doesn't need the political capital. He doesn't care what the polls say, right? If he can get through the midterms with a Republican majority, then he can get done what he has to get done. So that's always been my thought, is he had to get through the midterms before you're going to see a Barack Obama get arrested or anybody. I mean, Barack Obama would be an aspirational goal, right? And I actually really doubt that they'll go after him because of the historical context of it. I think they're going to want to whitewash history and make it sound like, John Brennan overthrew the government and not Barack Obama or something like that. Okay. So that's my thoughts on Bondi, and I'm not opposed to firing her, but I think Trump, the political capital of firing her and then having another 90 days to appoint another attorney general, we are not going to get a Matt Gaetz or someone we want. The Senate, the Republicans that voted for Pam Bondi aren't going to vote for a middle of the ground, or a MAGA Department of Justice. You're going to end up with another Bill Barr. So you're going to end up with Trey Gowdy or something dumb like that. So that's my challenge with firing Bondi, is it's like, well, what's the plan then? Because that's going to delay everything 90 to 120 days. The other thing is Pam Bondi is having to directly manage a lot of these districts where the blue slip has prevented Trump from getting a United States attorney in there. So she's had to micromanage those with interim appointments. So firing her might do way more harm than good. And I'm not completely convinced that she's, a snake in the grass, so to speak. But, I could be convinced, just like I could be anyways. Often wrong, never in doubt. Let's see here. Continuing on. Give my love to your beautiful, lovely wife. Of course I will. And that's it from the chats this morning. So thank you very much. If you're on Rumble and you can, please even just drop in and say hi. Especially if you haven't chatted once before this month, that would be awesome. Okay, our next topic. There was a clip that circulated this weekend. One of America's billionaires talking about the copper shortage and how if we were to grow at 3% GDP, all the copper in the mines today isn't sufficient enough to build the infrastructure. Literally, the copper wiring in the walls. We don't have enough copper. So just like we've seen the price of silver, which is over 110 right now. In fact, let's check on that this morning. It was 110. I think it peaked at 114 last night. And then it dropped, and then it went right back up. So let's see where it's at. $112 this morning. It's up $17, 17.99% this week. Let's look at gold. What's gold at? Gold is at $5,093. Oh my goodness. When they started making that Gold Rush series and they were talking about how gold was at an all-time high, it was at $1,800 an ounce. $1,800 an ounce, and you could not make money in the Yukon mining for gold because that was a really high price. They had figured out how to run those operations at around $900 an ounce, and at $1,900 an ounce, you could have a crappy mine and still break even or make money. Well, with the gold spot price at $5,093, you're probably going to make money. But then again, what does this compare to the dollar? One of the things with silver, in fact, I'll just share the screen with you guys so you guys can see it right along with me, because it is relevant to this topic. So one of the things with, so let's look at this here. Look at this breakout. Let's look at the 1 year breakout of silver. I got to change. Okay. So if we look at the 1 year of silver here, look at that. That is a nice, steady run. So this is when I got home from prison and I got on my silver standard, $29.70. That was my first, it was pretty much right at about a year ago now. Right about a year ago now is when I got my first silver in my account, and it was $29.70, and sitting here today, it's at $114 in 1 year. That is amazing. 284.25% increase in value, 82.83 in 1 year. You go 5 year, look at that. It was pretty much flat for decades. Gosh, I timed that right. Kelly, look at this. It is so, look at that line. It's crazy. The price in silver is going up like that because of real tangible demand. It's not a speculative market. It's not that people are trying to just dump the dollar and go to silver. It's because they need silver in robotics and in technology. All of these data centers, all of the comms wires are in silver. Apparently it conducts better than copper or anything else, right? There's a physical demand for industrial supply of silver, and that is what's driving the price up. Copper has the same thing going on. Copper is having a huge industrial shortage. Let's see if I can find a copper spot price. So copper right now is trading around $5.95 to $6 per ounce, or approximately $13,000 per metric ton. Copper, I think, has more upside than even silver does, based on what some people are kind of saying, or some experts are saying that are in the industry of it. So gold is for the elites, silver is for the gentlemen, copper is for the peasants. So I'm seriously considered, and if anybody within the sound of my voice is interested in doing this, I'm interested in doing a peasants copper mint. I'm interested in having mint and making copper pennies, peasant pennies made of copper, because they're getting rid of real pennies, right? So we, the people, the peasants, can have our own circulating copper pennies that'll end up translating to dollars, right? If you have a 1 ounce copper coin, that's $5. And copper is going to be in incredible demand, and people are totally missing the mark on copper. So silver has had a huge run up, and it's going to keep running up, in my opinion, to probably close to $1,000 an ounce. Okay. But that'll make it unusable as currency. Copper could be usable as currency, and it has huge upside. It's like buying silver way back when. Take a listen to this.
I will pick copper.
Okay. Copper.
We are still completely underestimating how short we are in terms of the global demand supply dynamics of a handful of critical elements that we need. Again, in the Trump doctrine view of the world, that is no longer as multilateral as it was, and we need to have unilateral national security. And if you look through that lens, the asset that is set up to go absolutely parabolic is copper. And the reason is that it is, at least as it stands today, the most useful, cheap, amenable, conductive material that we have. That material manifests in everything from our data centers to our chips to our weapon systems. It's just everywhere. And right now, Jason, we are on a path by 2040 where we will be short about 70% of the global supply at current course and speed. And so I will pick copper.
Copper. Copper, copper, copper. Okay, so I am trying to find a video that I think, after talking as much as I just did about copper, I want to share with you guys. But I need to find it really quick because, oh, here it is. Perfect timing. Perfect timing. Okay, so this is the clip I wanted to share that goes into the detail of why copper. So why copper is on the list of metals that we should be getting a hold of. And I'm very serious. If anybody out there within the sound of my voice is interested in going into some kind of joint venture on a copper mint to create peasant pennies for people so that, you know, we can have circulating copper, I think that would be awesome. Miss Dr. Mitri, welcome. You're a new name. Good morning. Morning to you, peasants. And we say good morning to you. Tiff Time, good morning. Welcome. Okay, let's listen to this
Power
clip.
cables are so expensive.
Let's listen to this clip here. It's a couple minutes long. You, as a peasant listening to this, now you might be out there curating your own news and stuff like this, but these are the little things that if you can grab onto something like this early enough, it can be life-changing for you. Imagine right now, let's pretend you had $13,000 sitting around and you went out and bought a metric ton of copper. Seems crazy, right? It's really not that big a deal. It's like having a block of copper. So you'd get a nice big chest full of copper blocks or whatever, and you just sat on it for 5 years. That $13,000 could translate to something like $130,000 in just a number of years, right? Because the demand for copper is going to outpace the worldwide supply.
Copper and aluminum are the primary beneficiaries of the grid spending increase. That $800 billion is going to buy copper, which is money. So how big is the oil market compared to the metals market? If you look at that circle, that's crude oil. You want to get rid of crude oil? The iron ore, the gold, the copper, the aluminum, the nickel, all the metals are so thinly traded and so critical. You have no chance to get off of crude oil. You can't build electric cars and windmills and solar and have a modern military without these metals. So there's a reason why underwater power cables are so expensive. That's what it looks like when you put up a windmill offshore Nantucket Island and you want to bring that electricity and be green. It's all copper, 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 copper. Copper right now, we're expecting that to be a $270 billion a year market by tomorrow morning. And where's this metal going to come from? There's no copper in inventory at all. Let me show you how bad this problem is. In human history, if we go back to Mohenjo-Daro, we have mined 700 million metric tons of copper. So if we put that in a big cube, you see the Eiffel Tower for scale. It's about 430 meters by 430 meters. Approximately 80% of all the copper we've ever mined is still in human possession. Now, if you want to get that back, no problem. We can recycle that. All we have to do is tear down every building in the United States, every building in Europe, every building in Japan and all of China, and we can get back about 80% of that 700 million tons, but we'll be living and freezing in the dark. The lights are on here because the copper that's embedded in this building. We can tear down this university and get the copper back. Yeah, we can recycle it. How much are we using? We're consuming 30 million tons of copper a year, only 4 million tons of which is recycled. That means to maintain 3% GDP growth, now listen carefully, with no electrification, this is with burning oil and gas. To maintain global 3% GDP growth, we have to mine the same amount of copper in the next 18 years as we mined in the last 10,000 years. In the next 18 years, I've got to mine the same amount of copper as we mined in the last 10,000 years without electrification, without data centers, without solar and wind and the greening of the world economy. You people have no idea whatsoever what we're facing. You're dreaming. Since 1900, the energy to produce copper, the energy you need to make copper is 16-fold up. As the ore grade in the world goes down, we need more and more energy to produce the very metal that produces the energy, and water consumption has doubled. So grades are declining in the world's mines. The easy copper mines were mined. They're like 100-year-old ladies laying in bed waiting to die in Chile. So Chile counts for a lot. That's 24% of global copper mine production. But, you know, their costs are in the third or fourth quartile. They're very expensive. They burn coal in the Chilean grid. And solar doesn't work for a mine because the sun only shines 5 hours a day. Solar is useless unless you have grid-scale storage. So we're heading for a train wreck in Chile. We need 6 giant tier 1 mines to come online every year between now and 2050, when I'm scheduled to be 100 years old, to meet copper demand. That means 40% of the production for new mines for electrification, data centers, and grid upgrades. And all this bullshit about AI, everything you're hearing, like, it's a fantasy because we don't have the energy. Now, maybe we can build nuclear power plants. What are they made out of? All those metals I told you about. We don't even have the capability in this country to weld the containment vessels in a traditional nuclear power plant. We used to build them in this country. Korea can build a nuclear power plant.
Breakdown. That is like this. This has gotten into the zeitgeist this week. This clip about copper kind of went viral. That's the signal, right? This is one of the concerns I've had for a long time because I'm in construction, right? So when I see a skyline, I don't see this beautiful skyline. I see mines, I see ore, I see distribution, transportation, I see sweaty workers, right? You have to build a skyscraper, and that requires parts and materials and supplies from all over the continent, if not all over the world. And copper is one of those things. A lot of the copper that you have running in your house probably came out of a mine from Chile, right? There's a good chance of that. It's not always domestically produced. I grew up a little bit near Kennecott Copper in Utah. I watched an entire mountain, it was already flattened. They basically topped this entire mountain. But if you've seen the Kennecott Copper mines out in Utah, they're a thing to behold. They're staggering. Copper is an incredibly important metal. And with all the growth that we have projected, with all of the AI and robotics, there are some real tangible bottlenecks. Metals, silver, copper, and others as well. I would love, Dr. Mitri, please, if you can hit me up on Telegram. I would love to communicate with you about that. I was out in Wisconsin this week looking at a farm. You're new to the group, but that is kind of what we do at 1776 Live is we do acquire land and put it in trust, and we have, community investing, so to speak, and whatnot. So, you might have been led to our little group because we are very serious about opportunities like that. If you have leads on land that have copper, or we can produce copper at any kind of scale that is beneficial and profitable, I think we would pursue that. So please connect. And of course, NDAs and all that stuff, that's all part of due course, but let's connect, not talking live on Rumble and talk about that. Yeah, let's be billionaires. I have a lot of people that would like to join us on that journey. Okay, so please connect with me, Dr. Mitri, and let's talk about that. Okay, guys, that is my show for today. I thank you so much for joining me, and we got a pretty good group that showed up here at the end. I started streaming early, and it looks like a couple of the regulars joined in because, yeah, that's cool. I love it. And for those of you that are regulars that didn't join live, and I'm talking to you now, you'll hear the replay, and I really appreciate it. Dr. Mitri, if you can find me on Telegram, at Peasant Pod, that would be great. You can also email me at Taylor, Taylor, at 1776live.us. So Peasant Pod, at Peasant Pod on Telegram, and Taylor at 1776live.us. Those are the ways that you can contact me. And then, of course, we can get phone numbers once we contact through those mediums. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us. There's no private broadcast today. And, let's see. Dr. Mitri says, there we go. I'm old school. Perfect. Yep. Okay. So thank you for joining us today. I had a great time on this trip. I got to see the big farm in Wisconsin. Super exciting things happening there for people in the 1776 Live and the Epic Trust community. That's going to be absolutely awesome. I think that there's great opportunity for people. And it sounds like we might even be mining in Michigan. That would be awesome. I'm very serious about producing copper pennies, peasant pennies, as I would like to call them, as a store of value for peasants. I think that anything that's going to have that kind of demand, even a small amount of copper, there will come a time, just like you can now, you go down to a pawn shop and you can sell your silver coin. A lot of those silver coins, if they don't have collectible value, do end up right now at the smelter. They're the biggest buyer of old coins or new mint coins, like your buffalo heads that are just like not unique. A lot of those are getting sold to the smelters. Yeah, smelters. And copper's the same thing, right? I mean, there's a reason why meth heads go after copper in houses, is it has, marketable value. You have to go to the junk guy to do it, but there'll come a point where you can go with a copper penny to a pawn shop and probably hawk it. So anyways, very good. Carlite says, dude, I'm in for the compromise. Let's talk soon. Dr. Mitri, you come into the right community because we have a great community. We have a small group here as peasants, but we're growing, but we're very, very focused on actually doing things. We don't just sit around and bluster. This show is for sitting around and bluster, but our 1776 live community is all actionable. Investing, money, it's very, very real and tangible. And we do that in private. We don't broadcast that publicly because those are private remedies for private people. The whole world doesn't need to know where our copper mine is. So, all right, guys, thank you so much for joining us. And we will talk to you guys again tomorrow. And I'll be back in studio with Ron. Bye.